Now we move on to the year 2000, where Shinji Mikami and his development team were working on the next Resident Evil game for the Sega Dreamcast, alongside the several other groups that Capcom had divided. As I said in the Resident Evil 3 video, the game was originally designed as a true sequel to Resident Evil 2, but it ended up being given the title of a spin-off in order to keep the original trilogy on PlayStation. And I think that's plainly visible with even a glance at both Code Veronica and Resident Evil 3. While Resident Evil 3 retold another story from the same set piece as Resident Evil 2, Code Veronica takes place right after Resident Evil 2, continuing the story, introducing new plot elements, and concluding others, all on top of a very obvious graphical upgrade. Code Veronica was touted as a standout title for the Dreamcast, sporting exceptional graphics for the time and solid survival horror gameplay. But unfortunately, being on the Dreamcast at all was kind of a sinking ship. The Dreamcast quickly died out, and like every game on it that was worth any amount of attention, it was quickly ported over to the most successful consoles at the time, renamed to Code Veronica X, and featuring some changes, I guess, like a new cutscene or two, and they changed the protagonist's hair. So that means that the original Dreamcast version is not even on the table now if you want to experience everything that this game has to offer. Surprisingly, this is actually one of the few classic Resident Evil games to get an official port onto modern consoles. On PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, it got a full-scale HD remaster with new lighting and clearer text, but also it turns the saturation way up and is kinda blurry from everything being smoothed over. Weirdly, this game got later releases, but they did not use the HD version. I chose to play the game on the most modern console available at the time of writing, the PlayStation 4, and that version is just an emulation for the PS2. It's not exactly the best way to play it though. It's like slightly wider than it's supposed to be on original PlayStation 2, and it's got this constant ghosting effect that you might not even notice if I didn't point it out. But nevertheless, this is what Capcom has on offer for modern consoles. So without further ado, let's take a look. Resident Evil Code Veronica X. The game takes very little time to jump right into the action. You get a very brief cutscene at the beginning that quickly explains what happened in Resident Evil 2. Then it jumps to 3 months later, and Claire seems to have been captured by some Umbrella goons.
Your identification number is WKD4496. Welcome to your new home.
Her name is Claire Redfield. We caught her trespassing in our Paris lab facility 10 days ago. She apparently infiltrated the complex looking for her lost brother, Chris Redfield, one of the surviving members of RPD's famous STARS teams.
Wait, what? With this happening in Paris? Umbrella's able to pull out the chopper and engage in this much destruction in an extremely populated city? This is already stupid as hell and I'm loving it. Claire finds herself cornered and she pulls the old drop your gun 4 feet and then fall down to catch it mid-fall tactic. Which surely couldn't have been faster or less conspicuous than just firing it normally, but damn is it cool. Then she ends up eye to eye with some black guy, and then, I don't know. They kind of skip a good chunk here. Somehow this somewhat even looking matchup ended up with her being captured. Then the game does like the exact same sound cue as Super Mario Sunshine. A mysterious figure approaches us, and so we have to ignite a lighter and a black man!
Perfect. Go on. Get out of here. This place is finished. I don't know, it might have been a special forces team. But in any case, this prison's been taken over. The troops have been wiped out.
What are you saying?
You're free to leave the complex. but you may as well know you have no chance of getting off this island.
And what about you? What are you going to do?
Don't worry about me.
So the dude is clearly injured, and on the ground we can see an empty jar of hemostatic medicine, which tells us that this guy is probably on his last leg. Unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do right now, so we're gonna have to head outside with just... oh no. A knife. We're given a chance to read the new controls, and thankfully this game has carried over the quick turn from Resident Evil 3. You can't manually walk upstairs anymore, but oh, there is this one fantastic addition where you now have the ability to use herbs you find on the ground without having to put them in your inventory first. It's a little lame that you can't combine herbs at this point, but it's still a fantastic addition. Something that I think most people have complained about if you've ever played these games. Like, it's right there, why can't I just eat it? As we move forward, we see that Code Veronica likes to do this thing where it'll hype up certain areas by slowing down transitions with a heartbeat, as if Claire is building up the courage to make the first step. And let me tell you, when I played this game as a dumb little kid who probably shouldn't have been playing this game, this terrified the hell out of me. Now though, this is an extremely tedious feature. You're just drawing out the unskippable door animations even further. And on replays, this is incredibly unnecessary. You're not going to scare me on my second playthrough. Please stop trying. I get it, you're spooky, I want to move on now. Up the stairs, we find a graveyard, and this is where a bunch of spooky zombies start bursting out of the ground and latching on to Claire. What a start! Code Veronica begins you with just a knife and absolutely surrounds you with zombies on a narrow path. This is startling enough, but here's the real kicker. The knife you get in this game is actually really fucking good. I know, I couldn't believe it either. Here, everything about the game's design is somehow working in favor of the knife. One swing grants you a surprising amount of range compared to the previous games, while still making it fairly difficult to use efficiently. And being able to hit an enemy in a way that keeps the knife's hitbox in their body for the duration of the swing will hit them multiple times. Pair this up with a very small amount of damage to the legs, and you have a weapon that can fairly reliably down and kill zombies if timed and positioned properly. But it's also not too easy, because if you hit a wall, it'll completely ruin your damage rate and cause you to recoil. Even against several of the stronger enemies in the game, the knife can be used for some workaround to make every encounter trivial. So yeah, Code Veronica's knife actually kicks ass. No knife bashing today! After escaping from the graveyard, we meet up with the standout character of the game, Steve Burnside, who talks and acts like a bad Sonic the Hedgehog impersonator.
Wah! Wait, don't shoot!
Who are you?
Huh? You're not a zombie. Well, great. Wait right there. I'm coming over. Sorry about that little misunderstanding, but I thought you were another one of those
Shut up! Make one wrong move and I'll shoot!
Relax, beautiful. I said I was sorry. My name's Steve. I was a prisoner on this island. And I'm guessing you're not from Umbrella either.
No, I'm Claire. Claire Redfield.
Claire? Nice. I'll remember that. Hey, I heard there's an airport around here. And once I find it, I can finally escape from this crazy island. I'll see ya.
Hey, wait up!
I don't want you following me, lady. You'll only slow me down.
Whoa! Girls are icky poo! Whoa! Not to spoil too much, but Steve is a very interesting character because he is so terrible that he turns around into being fun again. But we'll get into that as we go on. So now we're in the game, and let's talk about the elephant in the presentation department. I don't know. This game is entirely rendered with 3D models. No pre-rendered backgrounds here. And while I do feel like this game doesn't have as visually complex or appealing backgrounds as the previous games, I do think that it makes fantastic use of the 3D environments. Not being pre-rendered means that the camera is freely able to shift around. This allows for some very unique and creative camera placements. Sometimes. Other times it might just do something weird like shift the camera to face an empty section of wall that was just out of view for some reason, but usually it's pretty cool. While many of these graphics might look dated by today's standard, I wouldn't say they look outright ugly. However, one thing that really hurts the game graphically would be the character models. While they do have more detail than your average PS1 character model, it would seem that Code Veronica would suffer from what I call the Dreamcast face. Something that would linger on for many 6th generation console games. Facial complexity isn't fully here yet, so while the characters can emote, they do so very stiffly, and lip sync is basically non-existent, so everybody flaps their jaws like Muppets. It makes faces feel like plastic, which is still a step above the pixelated messes on PlayStation, but PlayStation games knew not to focus too hard on the heads. Code Veronica will get up and close so you can feel the barely present emotion coming off the character faces. But now, this may just be me coping, but in a weird way, it's the tiny missteps like that make the game's camp so much more enjoyable. When everything feels so awkward, you can't help but laugh at it. Now, as for the game itself, Claire continues on and we learn that we are basically on a concentration camp for anybody that Umbrella doesn't like. Over the course of these games, Umbrella has slowly ballooned into absurdity regarding their power. In the first game, they just seemed like a crooked pharmaceutical company. Then in the second game, it was clear that they had a stranglehold on at least the town of Raccoon City. Then Resident Evil 3 tells us that they have multiple personal armies and a global enterprise. Now both this game and Survivor tell us that Umbrella has multiple offshore islands that freely capture and torture people in the same line as literal Nazis. Umbrella, as the corporate entity that it is, has become more and more cartoonish as time has gone on. Also, isn't it a weird coincidence that both Survivor and Code Veronica feature Umbrella Islands that serve as prisons? I don't know, maybe that was planned. As we move ahead, we can see that the game is going all in on hyping up scares and threats. Code Veronica is chocked full of moments that basically say, "Oh, looky there, make sure you're wearing clean underwear because soon enough you'll be encountering something spooky." Technically, this is a fine addition. They can add a sense of tension for when you come back knowing that something's gonna pop out and make your day significantly worse. But my problem lies in just how blatant it is. Absolutely no subtlety here. Like, imagine the exact same scenario, but rather than stopping the game to focus all of your attention onto it, you might instead see it in the corner of your eye just as you leave. Or if when you return you notice that things are slightly different, and that tells you that something out there is altering the environment. I think it's much better to allow the player to build up tension rather than force tension. Seriously, why can't anything be as good as the Resident Evil 2 liquor reveal? All that said, there is an interesting part where the game forces you to unload all of your weaponry before going down a hallway multiple times. You have no means to defend yourself, and you just know that the zombies aren't going to stay on that side of the window for very long. Oh shit. As Claire explores the prison camp, she begins to pick up hints of the kind of people here, what exactly happened to them, and who's in charge. Regarding the people who are sent here, it seems to mostly be people who end up as thorns in Umbrella's side, or even unsatisfactory employees. Being sent to the gulag by Umbrella seems to be as much of a threat as being eaten alive by zombies. And most of the people who are sent to this camp end up being dragged to a building behind a guillotine, where their screams of pain can be heard from across the campus. The person in charge of this seems to be somebody named Alfred, and he has quite the temper, willing to throw away an employee's life over even the smallest of mistakes. Eventually, Claire meets up with Steve in a security room, and like a fucking creep, the first thing that he does once given access to the internet is Google Claire's last name.
Chris Redfield. Is he a relative of yours or something?
You mean my brother?
Ah, your siblings. Well, it seems your brother is under surveillance by Umbrella.
What? I've got to contact Leon and tell him to let my brother know he's being monitored. It's a good thing I have access to an outside connection from here.
Well, that file shows the latitude and longitude of this place. Why don't you send your brother the coordinates and ask him to come help?
Thanks, I'll do that.
Hey, I was just kidding.
Wait, you can just do that? I thought Chris's whereabouts and means of contact were completely secret as he escaped off the grid. The entire reason that Claire is here is because she was trying to find Chris. But now you say you can just ask Leon to contact him? That seems like it would have saved a lot of trouble. What I think the game is trying to say is that they have super secret information on Chris, but the game does a very poor job of making that clear.
There's no way he could get here, even if he is your brother.
Yes, he can, I'm sure of it.
No way. He won't come. You'll just end up disappointed if you rely on others. Believe me, I know.
What was that all about?
Now this is one of Steve's most common reoccurring behaviors. For you see, Steve is a little baby man who gets grumpy at the drop of a hat, propelling him into varying levels of tantrum. But why oh why is Steve so edgy when it comes to the subject of family? Stay tuned and we'll find out. From this point on, the game opens up to reveal the rest of the facility on the island, which offers a variety of paths to explore. Alongside the prison camp, there's an administrative building, a military training facility, and even an underground airport. That is the biggest way that Code Veronica's level design differs from anything before it. Imagine it like this. These large circles represent the primary areas that you explore, and the lines of the path that you take to get from area to area. The first two Resident Evil games feature large, prominent areas that you would complete before taking a short path to the next one. Then, Resident Evil 3 featured a bunch of small areas of prominence extended by long hallways. Code Veronica is interesting because it ends up as sort of a mix of the two. Somewhat complex areas that are connected by long paths that you occasionally have to run back and forth between. But what makes this exceptionally fun is with enough knowledge of the game, you can basically clear each of these areas as you come to them, while still offering the ability to travel back and forth as needed by the player. You got an important key item that needs to be used in the camp area? Well, you could immediately run there if you want, but for the most efficiency, you could plan your route to head there after you've acquired everything in the training facility first, which would not only save just time, but ammo and health if you're able to avoid enemies well. All because you won't need to come back here for a while, if at all. The enemy placement also takes much from Resident Evil 2 and 3. There are many more monsters in every area, like Resident Evil 2, and you'll often have to face hordes of zombies. Enemies will also appear and disappear depending on your progression, like in Resident Evil 3. But there are a number of ways that make this game much more challenging compared to Resident Evil 3. First, ammo is slightly more limited. You may assume the worst early on when you're picking up hundreds of pistol bullets, but you'd be surprised how fast you go through those things when dealing with a crowd. And there are a lot of crowds. Second, many of the more powerful weapons that you can get require you to go out of your way to grab them, which eats up time, and many of them actually take up 2 slots instead of 1, which makes up for getting another 10-slot inventory in this game. From an item management perspective, it's not exactly the most challenging Resident Evil game out there, but I do think that it's a bit more complicated than Resident Evil 3. We are once again squarely in survival horror territory. None of that wishy-washy kinda action, kinda survival horror nonsense like the previous 2 games. So that means that this game is way better than Resident Evil 3, right? Well, not exactly. Resident Evil 3 was constantly changing and introducing new locations to explore and fight through, but Code Veronica begins to feel the same throughout most of it. Or at least it isn't remarkably varied. These samey environments can be troublesome for new players, causing a lot of forgetfulness and repetitive backtracking. I am much more a fan of the compact level design of Resident Evil 1 and 2, as they cut down on backtracking while still being remarkably dense, something that this game does not manage well at all. There's also a lot of, completely pointless rooms. I don't know why this game does this, but there are, rooms that have basically no purpose other than to hurt you. And if they offer any items to you whatsoever, then it is a pittance compared to what you might expend. Long narrow path filled with 2 heavy enemies? How about an ink ribbon? That's what you wanted, right? Cost you 30 handgun rounds and some health, but that'll surely make up for it. The enemies in this game are much more difficult too, some attacking faster than your character's animations will allow. Hitboxes can be weird a lot here too, both in favor and against you. This game also goes heavy on unpleasant bullshit, like zombies silently hiding around corners, or these fucking bats. These bats suck. They constantly grab you and halt your progress while dealing a minimal amount of damage. But something that most new players don't realize is that if you have a lighter in your hand, these bats will actually leave you alone. I mean, I guess that makes sense in the vaguest way. Bats are nocturnal, so they don't like light, and I guess that a little bitty lighter is enough to scare them away. I think the only way that you'd be able to figure this out is either through coincidence, you just happen to pull out the lighter and oh wow, it works. Or by watching the demo video that plays on the title screen if you don't press anything. And to make things worse, there is a side quest to help Rodrigo, the black guy at the beginning of the game, by bringing him some hemostatic medicine. Doing this, however, will replace your lighter with a lockpick. Something completely unpredictable. You do this side quest a little too early, and you're just gonna have to accept the fact that the bats are gonna tear you apart in the purposely long hallways that you find them. Code Veronica has one of the hardest base stories in Resident Evil yet, and while I love me a challenge and would much rather play a hard game than an easy one, this isn't exactly hard for the best reasons. Oh, but more of that will come later. As we explore the admin building, we come across a theater room. It is here where we get to see the weirdest home movie ever. There are, some odd happenings in this place that may or may not be potentially incestuous. After the video plays, a room is revealed that contains a pair of golden Lugers. But unfortunately, anytime they're pulled off their mantle, the door locks behind us and the room turns into a microwave or something. It's a pretty obvious trap, not too obtrusive, so of course, the second that we begin to leave the building, Steve tries to steal them.
Yeah! Help me!
Steve?
Good. Dude, just put the guns back. Put the guns back in the slots. It'll stop all this from happening. You're doing it to yourself at this point.
That was too close. But I found something, thanks to you. Looks cool, huh?
Oh, I need those. Give them to me.
You gotta be kidding. I found it and I'm keeping it. Fine. Let's make a deal. I'll trade you for something fully automatic.
Jesus Christ, man. She saves your life after you're having a panic attack and you demand a trade in return? Those things don't even have fucking ammo in them. You don't need them. Whatever. I guess we're subject to Steve's desires, so we can't progress until we find an automatic weapon to trade him. But as we begin to leave, we are introduced to the game's primary antagonist, Alfred Ashford.
Redfield! How dare you interfere with my operation?
What are you talking about?
You let yourself be captured so you could lead your people to this base!
I have no idea what you're babbling about.
You don't fool me! I am Alfred Ashford, commander of this base.
Oh? You must be one of Umbrella's lower level officers if you're in command of a backwater base like this one.
How dare you! The Ashford family is among the world's first and finest. My grandfather is one of the original founders of Umbrella, Inc. Now tell me, why have you attacked this installation?
Attacked?
Shortly after you arrived, my base was attacked. You must have informed your people of its location.
I still don't follow you. I really don't know anything about that.
Unacceptable! How can you deny it? My base has been destroyed. And thanks to you, the experimental T-virus was released, creating countless zombies and monsters. Tell me, who do you work for? Who sent you? Have it your way, then. You're just a rat in a cage anyway. I'll be sure to keep you entertained before I dispose of you.
This is some fun as hell characterization for both Alfred and Claire. Alfred is a very easy to hate person. He clearly has some sort of privileged family and has a superiority complex. And Claire knows exactly how to push his buttons. Alfred is also a sadist. The only reason why he let Claire escape now is because he can make her suffer more later. Claire has spunk, Alfred is a weirdo, and this exchange was really enjoyable to watch. Pair that up with this silly organ music, and the presentation of this game is so absurd and full of camp. For the first time in a Resident Evil game, both the villain and the protagonist are fun, even if they're not exactly serious. And let's not forget that Alfred apparently has a sister somewhere, waiting to reveal herself. A while after this encounter, we head to the training facility. Here we can pick up the bowgun. The bowgun in this game is unique compared to the one in Resident Evil 2. In Resident Evil 2, it was a high damage dealer that quickly ate up ammo. In this game, it is the opposite. You will get hundreds of bowgun bolts, and it takes a dozen or so to take down a single zombie. Ammo for this thing is plentiful, but the pitiful rate at which it kills enemies makes it not very appealing, right? Well, that's true until you get your hands on bowgun powder. These very limited items will turn normal bolts into explosive ones, and they absolutely wreck house at a crazy high fire rate. Like, too high. You actually can end up firing so fast that you might waste several shots after an enemy is already dead. Or maybe they have invincibility frames. Either way, you gotta hold back. This thing is too fast for its own good. And another new feature in this game is dual-wielded guns. Some weapons will use both hands when aiming and will auto-target you to multiple enemies. Retargeting also allows you to focus both guns on one enemy. This ends up not being very useful at all, but it is a nice bit of flair, and I appreciate that from this very weird game. When we finally get to the training facility, we are greeted by an underground creature. This monster is known as the Gulp Worm. And the first thing that I would note about it is that it has to contend with Resident Evil 3's worm, the Gravedigger. Compared to Gravedigger, this has a fairly boring design. A lot softer looking, less intimidating. I'm pretty sure this is because of the Dreamcast graphics, but it literally looks squishy. In terms of gameplay, the Gulp Worm is going to constantly be roaming the yard in front of this facility. Now that is a really cool idea, having to avoid this large enemy every time you come back here. But the problem is that he is painfully ineffectual. You got about a 3-second run to the door every time you come back, which means that you probably won't even see the worm stick its head out of the ground before you enter the building. It's wild how much potential this idea had and then it immediately fell on its face. Claire explores a nearby laboratory, and as she begins to leave, she sees that something fun is happening inside. Well, now that place is locked off, but the worst part about this is that that alarm is the new soundtrack for this front hall. Hope you don't get tired of it. As we head out, Alfred suddenly ambushes us and lures us to a room upstairs.
Welcome, Claire. Consider the area you are in a special playground I have prepared just for you. Please try and keep me amused, and do not disappoint me by dying too soon. I so want to enjoy this.
Oh my god, he's so fucking weird. Once we head inside his little trap, we conveniently find a submachine gun that we could trade to Steve. How nice of Alfred to leave this here for us. And this is where we are introduced to Code Veronica's unique monster, the Bandersnatch. Bandersnatches are one-armed Gumby creatures, capable of stretching their arm long distances to attack or pull themselves closer. Their movement is very creative, as they're generally very slow, but occasionally pull themselves onto walls or over obstacles. I'm a big fan of their design, but I'm not sure how great they are with Resident Evil's fixed cameras, as unlike every other monster, these guys can hit you when they are far off screen, which, while startling, feels cheap whenever you're blindsided at no fault of your own. Also, these guys are surprisingly easy to kill with the knife. Like, if you aim down right in front of them, there's a good chance that you will just be out of range of their hitbox for the close-up swing, allowing you to go to town on their kneecaps. They could have been handled better, but overall, I think they're a pretty good addition. A unique design, a genuine threat, but not too difficult to take out with heavy weaponry. A solid mid-level monster. And right after killing the first Bandersnatch, another one immediately shows up and catches Claire off guard. Oh no! If only we had a nasally baby man here to rescue us in excessive fashion!
Oh yeah, that felt good! Don't worry, Claire. Your knight in shining armor is here.
Whatever. Here, take these.
Machine guns? For me?
You know the deal, in exchange for your Lugers.
Okay. This thing is too cool. Yes! Now this is my kind of weapon. All right! Huh? Hey, this thing's empty. You cheated me.
Dude, the Lugers that you gave me have no bullets in them either. At this point, this is a perfectly fair exchange.
All right. Ow! My back! You're heavier than you look. Hurry up!
Steve just called Claire fat.
What?
Now that your knight has made his appearance, he can join you in your descent into death.
So, as per tradition at this point, we play as a side character for a brief period. You know, like Sherry, Ada, Carlos. Here, of course, we play as Steve. Steve carries the submachine guns that we just gave him, and you clear out all the rooms ahead by just unloading into everything you find. Just absolutely mindless shooting without having to worry about health or ammo. And thankfully, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It comes to an end when Claire calls Steve on his bullshit, and he throws another big baby tantrum.
It was dirty work, but this area is now clean. See? You can depend on me. You see? This thing is a lot more reliable than any person.
Than people? Steve, what were you doing here? Who brought you here, and where is your family?
Shut up! I don't want to talk about it!
This leads to the pair falling through the floor because I guess Claire actually is too fat. Claire gets pinned while a zombie approaches.
What's wrong, Steve? Shoot him!
Wait! I can't! No!
And then, the best line delivery in the whole game. Shit's so silly, I love it. Absolutely wild how Steve's emotional climax is the funniest part of the entire game. So now Steve lays out his entire tragic backstory. Daddy was a snitch and the whole family paid for it.
Oh, Steve.
He was a fool to do something so reckless. So stupid.
It's okay now. Just rest.
Before moving on, there are a few things left to note. First, we find a projector that talks about some monster called the Albinoid. Made from taking the T-virus and putting it into a salamander gene. They can create bioelectrical shocks and they look like a vagina. Second, we managed to see the painting finally, which coincidentally happens just as the alarm deactivates. A weird little nitpick though is that there's no other entry points in this lab. And what killed the scientist earlier was clearly a Bandersnatch, so there's no way it could have gotten out. But what we actually encounter in there are some of those freaky little albinoids. This is pretty much the only place that we find them at this stage, and it causes quite the panic as it sets off the alarms again. The albinoids themselves aren't really much of a threat though. They only serve to get in your way as you rush to the door, likely electrocuting your ankles once or twice but not dealing any significant damage. And once you escape through the door, you can pretty much forget about them. Those little fellas are never showing up again. Next, we have to head back to the camp area, and this opens up the doctor's office. Here we learn about a doctor with his own sadism problem. Alfred apparently liked what he saw, so he gave him his own little medieval torture dungeon beneath his office. Because Umbrella employees have to be Nazi-level psychopaths apparently. We find the good doctor dead, in a body bag. But uh-oh, when you come back to the room you find him munching away on his neighbor. Being a psychopath also seems to give you like titanium skin or something, because for some reason this one zombie enemy is faster and stronger than most enemies in the game. Watch this dude eat like 3 grenade rounds, that is more than a Bandersnatch can take. And now as we head back to the administrative building, we see the first cutscene that was added in the Code Veronica X version of the game.
Greetings. You must be the lovely Claire Redfield.
Who are you?
Let's just say that I'm a ghost, coming back to haunt your dear brother.
Wesker?
Wait a second. You guys brought back Wesker? Seriously? This guy?
This is the ultimate life form. Tyrant! Chris? Stop it.
Wesker, you're pitiful.
Okay, so I know that nowadays there's a good chance that you're familiar with Wesker as a reoccurring villain in the Resident Evil games, but try to look at this from the perspective of somebody from when this game came out. Albert Wesker was an absolute buffoon of an antagonist. He barely hid his secret for the entire game, and when he does finally reveal himself, he is not only laughed at directly for how stupid his idea is, but he fucking dies immediately. Now here we are, he is acting like some sort of suave badass with a massive vendetta against Chris.
I despise Chris.
Chris didn't even do anything to you, he just laughed. You got yourself killed, dude. Oh, also, he also has glowing eyeballs and fucking superpowers? This is crazy, what the fuck is happening? On top of knocking Claire around, he then explains that he also caused the attack on the island that Alfred blamed Claire for, which means that her being transported here at the exact same time as the outbreak is a massive coincidence. But despite being able to punch a hole through her in an instant, Wesker leaves Claire alive for now.
Oh, how your brother will weep to see you die. What? What is it? Stay there. I'm coming. It appears you may be of some further use to me. I'm going to let you live a little longer.
Now before we head up to that spooky castle in the distance, let's talk about the puzzles. The puzzles in Code Veronica are fairly shallow, which is a huge step down from Resident Evil 3. A majority of the puzzles in the game are just like memory retention problems, and they take little to no effort to actually complete. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the painting puzzle, as I believe that this one stands out among the rest. After reading a history of the Ashford family, you have to press buttons under each painting in order of their lineage, beginning with the titularly named Veronica Ashford, and ending on the current owner of Rockfort Island, Alfred. In order to figure out who's who, you need to associate various clues found in the note to the painting, such as an individual being given a certain gift, or them being twins, or the hair color. Basically, it requires you to actually process what you read, as well as offering some important insight to Alfred's lineage. It stands out as one of the most memorable puzzles in Resident Evil so far. Finally, with all of the items that we have gathered, we can head up to Ashford Castle, which is surrounded by zombies and bandersnatches. Tons of bizarre imagery is found along the path to it, as well as inside the castle, with the main attraction being this creepy doll hanging as a centerpiece. This is one of the prime examples I was talking about when it came to creative camera use. As you begin at her feet and you slowly rise up the stairs and you reveal her bloody face. I just really hope that you have your lighter still on you, because that is a long way to climb with these fuckers biting at your neck. At the top floor of the castle, we finally managed to get our first glimpse at Alexia.
Keep focused, brother. Our enemy is only a little girl. Oh, why is this taking so long?
My apologies, Alexia, but I have been doing my best.
The revival of the Ashford family depends on your success, brother.
I am aware of that, Alexia. I will revive the family name myself and make you the master of the glorious Ashford family.
Do not worry, brother. I will handle them both myself.
Who is there? Is someone at the corridor?
Exploring the twins' rooms offers some important insight as to their past, like one that says Alexia is some kind of genius that graduated at the top of her class while just 10 years old. But more importantly, we can read a letter from Alfred where he makes it clear that he not only loves his sister, but he's straight up obsessed with her and their family status, believing that people of a lower class shouldn't even be able to witness her. Then, on our way out, an ambush by Alexia herself, and somehow she manages to miss a shot at point-blank range.
Wait! What's going on?
Steve! A secret door!
After her!
The two chase her through a secret door, and that's when things get really weird.
This must be...
What? No!
Wait a second. What just happened?
So there never was an Alexia after all.
You mean he thinks he's two people?
No, Claire, that's not what this means. You saw a video of Alfred playing with Alexia multiple times. She obviously exists, something must have just happened to her. What is more confusing is why exactly Alfred seeing himself with makeup on caused him to freak out like he just realized his own insanity. Has he never seen himself in a mirror in between dressing up? Regardless, not gonna lie, he passes extremely well. He's got the voice down to a T, cuts a hell of a figure in a dress, and apparently can do a quick change in only a few seconds. That is some high quality insanity right there. Anyways, Alfred Alexia activates the self-destruct sequence, so the race to the escape plane is on. But Alfred Alexia isn't gonna have that, so here comes the obligatory Tyrant!
I will not allow you fools to escape. This is what you get for trying to oppose me. Now feel my revenge.
This is the T078 model, which was created via cloning the T103 model, like Mr. X. I guess they decided that hands are overrated though, so they opted to give them giant bowling ball stubs instead. After we raise the bridge and begin to circle back to the plane, the Tyrant cuts us off as the area around us begins to burn and explode. And this is technically the first boss fight. And all it consists of is unloading into him until he falls down. Pretty simple, but there is a catch that becomes an unfortunate reoccurring theme in most of the boss fights for this game. Instant death. The Tyrant is constantly pushing you back into a cascade of flames. If he manages to push you far enough, then you instantly die. Most bosses seem to have a way to instantly kill you, which is a very cheap way of raising the stakes if you ask me, especially when you're trying to get an A rank, but I guess it makes up for it by being an exceptionally easy fight. Just stand in place and unload all your most powerful weapons into him. Don't risk anything and he'll go down in less than a minute. Once we get to the plane, we finally take off, thanks to Steve apparently knowing how to fly a plane despite being a teenager that was locked into prison for who knows how long, and the island explodes behind us. But there's a rumble in the back. Something's on the plane. Because of course it couldn't be that easy. Old Bowling Ball Fist is back, somehow managing to catch a flying plane after the island had exploded. And why does that sound familiar? His physical body has taken mild damage, so you know what that means. It's mutation time! But compared to all the previous Tyrants at this point in the franchise, this is really lame. He just gets like one little itty bitty claw poking out, while his uncle turns into an absolute beast. Regardless of his appearance though, he's incapable of being destroyed by basic weaponry at this point, and the limited space in the cargo hold means that he poses a huge threat. To make things worse, getting hit out of the back of the plane also counts as an instant death, and most of his moves serve to knock you around and send you flying. The only thing we can do is fire the cargo launcher at him as we try to knock him out or give us some space. He'll just push that thing right back if he's healthy enough. While this version of the Tyrant has some pretty difficult moves to avoid, this fight can be done fairly quickly with the right weaponry. Specifically, the newly introduced and extremely limited BOW gas rounds for the grenade launcher. The P-Epsilon gas that was briefly introduced in Resident Evil 2 has been carried over, and it now serves as one of the most powerful attacks against the Tyrant, and they are only found once in the game. All it takes to bring Edward Bowling Ball hands down are 3 gas rounds and a strike from the cargo launcher. And that sends them flying into the ocean.
What was wrong?
Oh, nothing. Just a giant cockroach that had to be stepped on.
Now, with the Tyrant defeated, the pair are finally able to relax. At least, they would, if it wasn't for Alfred, who's been trailing their plane in a jet, and he activates an autopilot that takes control away from Steve. Where they're going, they have no idea, but the two end up flying for so long that they both fall asleep. And that's when Steve decides to make his moves on an unconscious woman. Steve, man, you gotta fucking stop. You know this isn't right. This isn't who you are, man. Oh, thank God. The autopilot has taken the two to another Umbrella base all the way in the Antarctic.
Huh?
Latitude 82.17 degrees. That's the Antarctic. We're over the Antarctic!
What?
Which seems to be the same location that all the other escaped planes traveled to as well. It seems like none of the planes had any landing system installed though, so Steve and Claire are sent crashing into the facility in a collision that surely should have killed both of them. They didn't even have their seatbelts on. After jumping out of the plane, Steve prematurely ejaculates from Claire touching him, then continues to act like a weirdo.
Thanks.
Oh, plane's trashed.
And thus begins the second half of the game. Or so the save screen says. It feels like there's substantially more that happens in the second half, with an interesting twist on the Resident Evil formula that we'll get into a bit later. For now though, we are at the Antarctic base, which serves as a smaller level than Rockfort Island. It is densely packed, but has much less to explore, much like the greenhouse or lab in Resident Evil 1. And right in the middle of this whole area are the moths. These moths are located directly in front of the only safe room in the entire base for now, as well as a very important staircase that connects the upper and lower floors. While they aren't difficult to kill, they will respawn every time you enter the hallway, and they specialize in poisonous powders that are pretty difficult to avoid, as well as carrying the ability to leave a parasitic egg on your shoulder that lasts through multiple rooms, which will eventually hatch and poison you again if you don't button mash hard enough. It kind of feels like Code Veronica was looking at the previous game's poison mechanic and said, fuck you, this time you're gonna get poisoned. If you're even half decent at the games, you'll almost never encounter it. Poison is shockingly relevant in this game. As I said, the moths are placed in a position where you will constantly be running by them, putting yourself at risk of being poisoned every time you cross through this corridor. And spiders return again, and they've been placed in much more dangerously restrictive locations. But thankfully, in this specific case, there is a blue herb collection in the moth room that you can use at no cost. It does have a limit to the number of times that you can use it, but honestly, you're probably not going to reach it. After turning power on for the facility, we're able to move a locker, and here we're able to find a note from the Ashford family butler. He explains his lament at not being able to help Alfred's insanity from losing all his family, which consisted of his father, Alexander, who mysteriously vanished, and his sister, Alexia, who had died at a young age. This caused Alfred to descend rapidly into the madness we see today. Then, behind the locker, we get a glimpse at a creature locked away in the basement. This is a creature that has been haunting the workers of this facility with his ghastly moans, to which they have named him Nosferatu. Quickly moving away from that, Claire and Steve find some sort of drill truck that they could use to drill their way out of this facility. Steve takes control and once again fucks everything up by being a creep.
Steve, watch out!
It's all my fault.
Yeah, it kind of is. We go fix Steve's mistake and then we're ready to leave when Alfred catches up once again.
What was that?
It seems that Alfred's scream awakened something in Nosferatu, leading to his escape. But with Alfred taken care of, the two begin to drill into the wall, which, I don't know, rapidly begins to melt the ice? Either that or they're like drilling into the Arctic Ocean, which would be way more devastating than it actually is. Whatever, the building begins to slowly fill with water while Steve and Claire manage to escape. In order to reach something, they had to climb up to a helipad. And it is here where they are somehow cut off by Nosferatu, who steps out of the blizzard and begins to rapidly mutate. And this gives him a little arm thingy. I don't know, it's just like a big stick that sticks out of his torso. Honestly, this is just an extremely lame monster design. They had something interesting going on with the whole blind and bound human part, but then they just throw in one long finger-like appendage for him to swing back and forth while he waddles around. Doesn't stop Steve from being immediately taken out of the fight though. This leads us into the Nosferatu boss fight, which is a mixed bag of interesting ideas and poor executions. Nosferatu has very few attacks that deal noticeable damage, consisting mostly of long-range swings of his arm thing and occasional sprays of poisonous gas. That's what this is supposed to be, by the way. I know it's really hard to discern, but these little like fountains that pop out of seemingly nothing are supposed to be like his poisonous blood? The gas is constantly changing direction and speed along with the wind, which makes it fairly unpredictable. But also, it just consists of a bunch of particle effects, so its hitbox is really hard to figure out. Sometimes I get stun locked into oblivion, sometimes I manage to walk away unscathed. Sometimes the gas spouts right next to you and you can do nothing about it. Other times the wind will suddenly blow in your direction and you'll be stun locked until it subsides. So you might say then they should keep as much distance as possible between you and him. But then that brings in his other gimmicks. First, the entire arena takes place high up with no walls or railings. One fatal swing and you could be sent flying to your death almost instantly, which means hanging around the edge can be very, very risky. But maybe you decide to play it super duper safe and run away every time he gets close while unloading into him from a distance. Well, Nosferatu is a very bulky boy, being able to take tons of damage, excluding shots to his obvious weak spot. The fixed camera auto aim isn't going to help you with that very much though. This is where this fight's unique weapon comes into play, the hunting rifle Alfred dropped when he fell into the hole. For the first time, we have a weapon that provides full first-person aim control, which makes it perfect for aiming at that specific weak point. The problem is that everything else is working against you here. The rifle only has 7 shots, with absolutely no means to reload it, and it comes equipped with a bizarre reticle on the scope. I mean, where am I aiming here? At this arrow point near the center, or is it like right in the center between these 2 arrows with no dot or point indicator? Even if you figure that out, the Heart's hitbox is extremely finicky and hard to pin down with him constantly moving. And on top of all that, the blizzard makes seeing anything that isn't right in front of you near impossible. By the time Nosferatu is close enough for you to be able to comfortably aim at his chest, you're probably about to be punched or poisoned. So while you can just run and unload for the whole boss fight, it is extremely risky but rewarding to get up close and precise by ending the fight earlier. The game even gives you unique cutscenes if you manage to end the fight with perfect heart attacks with the rifle or knife, which returns once again to be surprisingly useful if you're really skilled with it.
I've got you now.
While I do appreciate the challenge, I am not a fan of how seriously the small mistakes can affect you in this fight. One miscalculation, insta-kill. Take too long, poison. Can't figure out how to aim the dumb reticle? Too bad, only got 7 shots. It's a very interesting fight, but the huge gap between safe and risky play makes it unreasonable for anything in between. Either you're gonna waste a lot of ammo in this guy, or you are gonna nail every single shot you make. Or you could be like me and fucking die. But after so much hardship, Claire and Steve finally managed to reach the other side where they locate a snow vehicle that they can use to drive away. But something's happening underneath the surface. Somehow, after being riddled with bullets, falling down a massive hole to who knows where, and being covered in freezing water that rapidly filled up the hole and beyond, Alfred is still alive. And surprisingly, he's not the only one.
Alexia! Alexia, you're finally awake. Alexia.
Suddenly, some kind of tentacle flies out of the facility and knocks out Steve and Claire, instantly stopping them in their tracks and leaving their fate up in the air. Wait, how are you getting that camera shot? Aren't they like out in the middle of a frozen tundra in the Antarctic? Anyway, this is where a massive shift occurs for the rest of the game. This entire time, Chris Redfield has been successfully contacted and has traveled to Rockfort Island to find his imprisoned sister. Now we get to play as Chris again for the first time since the original Resident Evil. No, I don't count Extreme Battle. His segments feature a creative twist by having us revisit all of the previous locations we explored as Claire, but only after they had experienced dramatic changes to their structure. Great idea, but I thought Rockfort had been set on self-destruct. Besides a bit of rubble and fire, this place is surprisingly intact. The point of a self-destruct is to completely destroy a location so no evidence can be recovered. This place failed miserably at that. Not only is the island mostly explorable and operational, but even the computers still kinda work. There is tons of evidence here. Just call Leon back and be like, yeah, I got some stuff on Umbrella, we're taking him down. Anyways, the first thing that Chris stumbles upon is a crypt holding Rodrigo. If you had saved him previously as Claire, then he'll offer Chris some info before being gulped by the Gulp Worm. In the next room, there's a small boss fight where you can fight Gulpy in a small arena, or alternatively, you can just press the elevator button and bail after a minute or so. It's a pretty easy fight, just be moving when he's underground and unload when he pops his little head out. He can actually be killed in seconds with the right weaponry. Wait, weaponry? Chris starts out with just a handgun and knife, but surprisingly, he shares the same ethereal pocket dimension inside the storage box that Claire has. Anything that she had in the box, including health, ammo, weapons, are magically transferred over to Chris. So, while this isn't exactly something you'd expect on your first run, meaning you might have loaded Claire up with the most powerful weapons to fight Nosferatu, anything left over can be used by Chris to make this worm fight a breeze. Killing the worm causes it to spit out Rodrigo before dying. And I guess something not immediately visible to us is that the worm's stomach brought him down to his last health point. So with his dying breath, Rodrigo gives the lighter he got from Claire back to Chris, which is used to get another pair of submachine guns that was put in the crypt for some reason. I guess this place is just chock full of secret submachine guns for some reason. After this, the rest of the island opens up. Overall, it is a smaller area to explore, but the new changes to the pathing is very disorienting while your brain has to restructure the map you had previously internalized. This happens again later on, and is a contributing factor why I think this is one of the most difficult Resident Evil games for newcomers. There are also certain passages that might be closed off if you didn't open them as Claire. It gets even more complex when you reach the shotgun. As a similar mechanism to what we saw in Resident Evil 1, the shotgun sits on a lever, and when it's removed, it causes a staircase to open and close. This staircase opens a very important loop. But if the shotgun is in your inventory, then a huge time loss will occur from having to go the long way back to the other side. An interesting trade-off for playtime and arguably boredom versus having a powerful weapon to defend yourself from strong monsters you'll inevitably run into. But it also seems like Chris isn't the only one on the island still.
Alexia? No! She's already fully awake. Chris, oh little fishy, come see my hook.
Wait, how are you getting these camera shots? Why does everybody have a perfect camera shot around here? Wesker unleashes a bunch of familiar faces, the Hunters. Or more accurately, Hunter 2, Electric Boogaloo! While they look extremely similar to the originals, these are a new variant created by Wesker and the organization that he works for. These versions are paired up with drones called Seekers that seek out hostiles and then alert the Hunters to come running, meaning that they are somewhat trained now. This adds to the difficulty by making the player strategically move around Seeker sensors or else they'll have to expend health and ammo on the Hunters that come running for them. And the Hunters in this game are just as difficult as other titles, featuring fast movement, heavy attacks, large health pool, and so many fucking invincibility frames. I think there is a striking difference in how they're animated though. The Resident Evil 1 Hunters were extremely snappy with their movements, making them feel fast, but these versions feel slower as they waddle around and have significantly more frames in their actions. They still feel fast, but they also feel like they kind of lumber around more. But that's mostly a subtle change in the animation I think most people wouldn't notice. The Hunters also have a side variant called Sweepers, which act the same as a normal Hunter, except now, their base attacks can poison you. Like, holy shit, Hunters were already powerful enough as is, adding poison onto them is just cruel. Man, this game just fucking loves its poison. Eventually, Chris ends up coming face to face with Wesker, and while Wesker does take the opportunity to knock Chris around, he also chooses to spill all the details about why he's here, what he's looking for, and the whereabouts of Chris's sister.
No idea how much I hate you. You destroyed my plans, so now I've sold my soul to a new organization. Now, die. Here's a little secret, Chris. I figured out that your sister is now in the Antarctic. With Alexia. It's too bad you won't be seeing her again.
Thankfully for Chris though, Wesker has the attention span of a goldfish and immediately bails at the sound of a cute girl.
Alexia?
So whoopsie, Chris came all this way and Claire isn't even here. Now he's trapped on this island and he has to find a way to get off. The rest of the island is a pretty standard affair, with the last notable encounter being with an adult albinoid. Now this fight has a very special technique that I call grabbing the important item then running. The arena that this fight takes place in is extremely awkward and the albinoid is very quick. Successfully aiming and hitting it from outside the water is not an easy task. And fighting the thing in the water is basically a death sentence due to the constant shock attacks that cover the entire pool. If there's an easy way to kill this thing, then I'm unaware of it. But that's kind of irrelevant because the quickest solution just seems to be running into the water, grabbing the key item, and running back while powering through any damage you might receive. Once you leave his arena, you never have to worry about him again. But with the final key item acquired, Chris gains access to the super secret jet room. And Chris can be thankful that despite Alfred having already used one of the jets, he had a backup one that is perfect for traveling to Antarctica in no time. So this brings Chris to the Antarctic base, which is suffering from a massive amount of ice that entered the facility when Steve and Claire drilled through the wall, as well as a bunch of weird tentacles that have broken into the structure. What is also interesting is that we can see the progression from the moth larvae inside the infected zombies as they might jump out to latch onto you. And what was originally the main room has now frozen over the first floor entirely, allowing us to walk over it. Beneath the surface of the ice, we can see Nosferatu's body chained on a hook. What's more troubling is the extremely subtle, almost missable giant spider that follows us from below. Now that is the low-key scare that I was looking for. Why was that missing from the beginning of the game? Once you get the key item to make the spider come out, it also is kind of disappointing in the same way that the adult albinoid was. While it looks intimidating and it might knock you around a bit, the clear answer here is to just get the key item and bail as soon as possible. After that, you'll likely never have to run into this thing again, and even if you do, it's just a brief jog around him. And now, before we continue on, I'd like to take a moment to discuss the music in this game. Code Veronica does a lot of things to make a stupid, tone-deaf loser like myself appreciate the soundtrack provided. One of the most obvious things is that it created an original nursery rhyme for this game that becomes the leitmotif for the Alfred family.
There was a friendly but naive king who wed a very nasty queen. The king was loved, but the queen was feared.
The rest of the soundtrack incorporates opera-like vocals to give a lot of the tracks this feeling of regality on top of the standard intense action music. I can't exactly say that Code Veronica's soundtrack is the best, but these aspects make it stand out to me more than the previous entries. Because the game drilled home that leitmotif, I feel like there is a specific tone that this game incorporates that the others don't. And because of that, it's easier for me to remember. Here in the Antarctic base is where all the secrets of the story start to be unveiled. Alfred and Alexia were born from a genetic experiment featuring the late Veronica Ashford's DNA. Alexander Ashford had discovered the key to manipulating the genes that control intelligence, which made the twins exceptionally smart, but it had a very particular effect on Alexia, which turned her into a genius. But after discovering the purpose of their birth, the two began to resent their father, for some reason. Like, okay, it kinda sucks that you were born as an experiment, but also you two are geniuses? Kinda sounds like a net win to me in the end, but what do I know? In order to get back at their father, they decide to infect him with their own T-virus offshoot, the T-Veronica virus, named after their late ancestor. This ends up mutating Alexander, changing his body and filling his blood with a poisonous gas, before turning him into a mindless monster, the Nosferatu. This explains why he broke free of his containment after hearing Alfred's dying voice. But this whole endeavor wasn't a complete waste, as it showed the pair exactly what they need to do in order to combat the virus's negative effects, and giving the properly infected individual incredible bug-themed superpowers that also includes controlling tentacles, I guess. A body infected with the virus would need to be placed in extended cryostasis so they could slow down the mutation and allow the body to accept the virus without corruption. Alexia, who is now chasing godhood, chose to infect herself with the T-Veronica virus, and have Alfred freeze her for the 15 years needed. So get this, 15 years of waiting, and her dip in the liquid nitrogen just so happens to end at the exact same time that this massive outbreak occurred. Not just that, but specifically in time to witness Alfred die at her feet, and stop Steve and Claire from escaping with their newly found power. Holy shit, what a massive coinky-dink that ultimately changed the entire fate of this planet! It's also pretty clear from both her actions and her directly saying so in notes that Alexia is kinda crazy and mad with power. Despite Alfred being her brother, she sees him and everybody else on this planet as some kind of worker ant, with her as the queen. They only exist to serve her, and their deaths are nothing but expected. This is made clear by how she just dumps Alfred's body into her cryostasis tube after he passes away. Again, I think the characterization for these villains are pretty great. They have long histories that explain why they are the way they are now, and they all pose genuine threats that constantly interfere with the protagonist's plans. And possibly most important, they're all easily hateable thanks to their pompous attitudes. Every single villain in this game is just begging for a punch in the nose, and it's a welcome change from the main antagonists who are just big scary monsters or boring meanie heads. As Chris explores the new parts of the facility, it'll become incredibly obvious to anybody who's played Resident Evil 1 just how similar many of the rooms are to the Spencer Mansion, even though the layout doesn't make much sense. There's even another tiger eye puzzle that connects to the ant room. It's just a room where we keep all the ants. Just an absolute room of pain. Try not to get stung too many times. Chris is eventually able to find Claire inside of a goo cocoon. So hey, remember that Nosferatu fight? If you took too much poison gas damage, you get poisoned. Kinda weird that they'd poison you and then just switch characters before you could heal, right? Well, if you got poisoned, then that isn't going away. Chris has to go find the serum to cure Nosferatu's specific poison. Where this item is located is only really told to you through a specific file, and the item will not show up until it is needed, which could be a massive time sink for new players, or even a death if they're too slow, but that's probably not gonna happen. Right after saving Claire, Alexia shows up just to laugh and walk away.
Alexia? There really is an Alexia?
It is almost time, you genetically inferior siblings.
Then she summons a tentacle to break the staircase and separate Claire and Chris once again. Here's where we play as Claire for one last time. It's a short segment, no save spots, and very few items to pick up. But would you believe me if I told you that this 5-minute segment was the worst part of the entire game? So bad that I can't even believe they included it in the final release. If you've ever played this game before, you know exactly what I'm about to talk about. First, Claire has to retrieve a keycard in order to open a door. The keycard is located inside of a crystal ball, inside of a cannon, for some reason. As soon as the ball is removed from the cannon, a giant concrete slab begins falling anytime Claire moves under it. Why does this happen? Who connected the motion-activated slab to the cannon being tilted? I don't know, but we're apparently dealing with some Super Mario shit now. If you get caught under this slab, it is an instant death. So now we need to get the card out of the ball. How do we do that? By placing it directly under the slab. This is by far the most nerve-wracking thing I've experienced in a long time. Especially if you're going for an A rank, which requires no deaths and no saves. This can completely ruin your run in an instant. So of course, the pressure is on. You better make sure you press the right button and don't freeze up like I might have done. But hey, you managed to crack open the ball, now what? Well, now you need to retrieve the card. Now this part is just absurd. Based on what you've likely seen regarding the slab's drop rate, it should be obvious that the slab should drop much quicker than you could pick up the card and run away. By all means, this should be impossible. The solution to this problem is to not miss a second of time after you cause the slab to drop once, which will give you just enough time to pick up the card, despite the fact that the slab is probably about to drop on your head as soon as you exit the menu. But instead of that happening, the slab locks in place after you pick up the card, despite that making absolutely no sense. Like what, does the slab just turn off when the card detects somebody is holding it? None of this makes sense, and the mistakes are extremely costly. Insta-kill movement-based puzzles do not belong anywhere near a Resident Evil game, let alone a puzzle this shitty and nonsensical. But oh no, we're not done yet. The card sends us to a hallway where Steve is sitting, pinned to the wall. Claire tries to save him, but Alexia has injected him with the same T-virus she used on her father.
That crazy woman told me she was gonna perform the same experiment on me that she did on her own father. She's completely insane.
What's wrong?
Claire! Can't breathe! Claire! Help me! Claire!
What the fuck? Why did you become a giant goblin man? That was the same virus that created Nosferatu, right? Just the T. Veronica virus? Shouldn't he just grow a dumb arm thing? Not turn into a Stegosaurus person? So this is the Steve fight, and fight is used loosely here. Steve is pretty much invincible and he hits like a truck. And while he can be stunned with the right weapons, doing so is extremely ineffectual and wasteful. The most obvious tactic here is to just run away, as indicated by the closing gates. Seriously, look this fight up on YouTube. Literally everybody just runs away immediately. But the problem is that if you run, Steve will catch up with you very quickly. Multiple times in fact, and it only takes 2 hits to kill you. Yes, there is a high skill tactic where you can run around him and he can't touch you that way, but it's so difficult that you cannot expect an average player to pull it off. The alternative to just running away is that you have to equip a powerful weapon, and then you have to perform this cycle of running 2 steps ahead, then doing a quick turn, firing a shot at Steve, then doing another quick turn, running 2 more steps, and repeat over and over and over again. While doing this will save you some health, it's an incredibly awkward and anticlimactic way to handle a fight like this. Regardless of what you choose to do, you're still gonna have to pause this potentially exciting escape sequence. No matter how you look at it, this is just an awful boss fight, paired up with an awful section altogether. Needlessly punishing the players, completely inappropriate challenges for a slow survival horror game filled with nonsensical design choices, this area alone would decrease the score of a game by at least 1 point. Eventually, Claire will manage to escape from Steve before he reaches her, or at least more than he already did. And Claire will be left to just watch her new monster boyfriend. Unsatisfied with the result, Alexia sends in a tentacle to hold Claire down, even though she is trapped in a small room and probably just needed to open the gates to let Steve in. At the last second, Steve comes to his senses and chooses to slice the tentacle instead of Claire, and the tentacle responds by punching him in the chest. And then Steve turns back into a human for some reason. Like, what the fuck is this shit? His body mutated into a grotesque monster. He can't just anamorph back into his old self. I assume they did this because Claire crying into a big dumb goblin would have been a bit too silly for this supposedly heartbreaking moment, but it still makes absolutely no sense.
You're warm.
Steve, you've got to hang in there, okay? My brother's come to save us. We're getting out of here.
Your brother kept his promise. I'm sorry, I cannot.
What are you saying?
I'm glad that I met you. I love you, Claire.
Steve? Steve? Steve?
Aw, how touching. Now, with that somber moment lingering in our minds, allow me to ruin the moment by explaining why Steve and Claire's relationship was never romantic or positive in any way, and how they had absolutely no romantic chemistry. Throughout the entire game, Steve only existed to cause problems. He gets himself into trouble, refuses Claire's requests, impedes progress multiple times, and devolves into childish tantrums over the littlest thing. Besides the desire to keep both parties alive, Claire has rarely shown any interest in Steve. While Steve became infatuated with what I assume is the first woman he's met in years due to his imprisonment, Steve comes onto Claire several times in a pompous, overcompensating manner, and even attempts to make out with her while she sleeps. The only thing that Steve has going for him is that he saved her life a few times, which, while nice, is the laziest way to make somebody fall in love with another person. Normal people will help others, it doesn't mean they love them. Steve seems like the kind of person that would fall in love with the cashier because she smiled at him. And meanwhile, while Steve is constantly fucking things up and getting his ass kicked, Claire's interactions with him mostly just consist of her saying,
Steve. Steve. Oh, Steve. Steve?
Over and over again. For half the game, she's just feeling pity for the angsty teen. These two have absolutely no chemistry, with Claire constantly having to look out for and take care of this baby man, who constantly makes her job harder and harder. So I'm sorry if I don't think that this tragic ending is very emotional. Steve was a terrible character who's more fun to laugh at than to take seriously. Rest in piss. With that sequence done, we switch back to Chris, who I guess has been hiding behind a pillar this whole time as he watches Alexia and Wesker confront each other for the first time. Wait, how did she get back here? Didn't she run out of the room? Why are you back here again? Whatever, let's just enjoy these two egotistical villains tear each other apart, in another cutscene added in the Code Veronica export.
Come with me. You're responsible for the creation of the T-Veronica virus. And now the only existing sample is in your body. I want it. Now!
You want it? You are not worthy of its power!
You're coming with me. Chris! Wesker. Chris, since you're one of my best men, I'll let you handle this.
So this is a brief fight with Alexia's first form, which looks like the Green Giant's Goth GF. Like the other bosses so far, this offers a unique spin on the boss formula while also being surprisingly difficult due to an insta-kill move. Alexia is able to spray her blood in lines, which then combust into flames a second later. Why combustible blood is a part of the T-Veronica virus? I don't know. It's bugs, it's fire, it's a lot of things. Stop asking questions. Whenever she does this move, she can cut off many of your escape routes, and if the blood lands on you, you go into a lengthy animation of you having to brush the fire off. All of this is in service of her slowly inching closer and closer to you. If she manages to catch you, then that is yet another instant game over. This game just fucking loves instantly killing you. Other than those gimmicks, this fight is pretty straightforward. In fact, with the Magnum, you can end it in less than 10 seconds. Oh yeah, the Magnum. Yet another reoccurring nightmare for anybody that's played this game before. While exploring the deeper parts of the Antarctic facility, you can find a Magnum on a box behind some fire. Now here's an interesting reoccurring scenario among players. In order to get the Magnum, you would need to refill the fire extinguisher you got at the beginning of the game. But because there are no storage boxes that early on, a huge number of players will have left the empty fire extinguisher inside the security box by the metal detectors. For some reason, there isn't a means of making sure that no item is left behind inside these deposits. So if you forgot the empty extinguisher that wouldn't be useful until the very end of the game, then you're completely locked out of getting the Magnum. You could just blame the players for leaving something like this behind, but with no clear future use and how easy it is to forget about, I'd chalk this up as a flaw in the game's behalf. After defeating Alexia, we're able to collect all of the key items needed to progress to the final area. Claire is still locked in a room with Steve's body, but she tells Chris that if he activates the self-destruct sequence, then all the doors will automatically unlock. So he turns on the warhead detonators in preparation to escape. But of course, just as they begin to exit, Alexia stops them once again. Chris has to finish this, so with Claire's help they activate the nearby BOW Eradicator weapon, the Linear Launcher, which still needs a few minutes to charge. And now the final boss fight begins. First, Alexia goes for Claire, but it only takes a single shot of any weapon to stop her. Alternatively, you can just watch Claire get bitch slapped. After the shot, Alexia begins to rapidly mutate in whatever the hell this thing is. Something reminiscent of a bug queen with the returning dragonfly theme incorporated into its upper design. This is a very bizarre fight that unfortunately operates like many of the lesser interesting boss fights in previous titles. It has 3 very large tentacles that cover a huge area of damage, seemingly making staying in one place less opportune. But the main problem with that idea are these little bug mine things that pop out of her insect Vagoober. They are difficult to hit and they will constantly hit you, which interrupts your own attacks. This is something that the grenade launcher seems built for, as the grenades go both straight ahead and below, allowing you to hit everything at once. Which means that the best strategy is to just stand to the side and unload your weapons until the game moves on. Using anything else will likely just be frustrating and time consuming, which makes this phase fairly disappointing. The next phase is much more interesting, if somewhat shallow. With her body destroyed, Alexia splits off from it, becoming a full-on dragonfly lady. Now the linear launcher is ready, and like the rifle before, this is a first-person only weapon, meaning that you have to aim it manually. Alexia will buzz around in a seemingly random pattern, making it extremely difficult to predict, but her own attacks are pretty easy to avoid, so it makes it more forgivable. All it takes is one lucky shot, and Alexia is instantly vaporized. Chris begins to catch up with Claire, and now the final cutscene that was added to the Code Veronica export. Wesker has caught Claire and is using her as bait to pull Chris away. Chris chases after her where they have one final standoff. Wesker originally came here for Alexia, but with her dead, that's pretty much mission failed. But luckily for him, he found somebody else who has the T. Veronica virus in his veins.
Sorry to disappoint you, but Alexia is gone.
That's no longer a concern to me. I have Steve to work with.
What?
Steve. In his body, there's still a living T. Alexia virus. Steve should be a good specimen. Maybe he'll come back alive just as I did, and be able to see your sister again.
The rest of this cutscene consists of Chris and Wesker throwing hands, but due to Wesker's new superpowers, he kinda just mops the floor with Chris immediately.
Sure, I'm not human anymore, but just look at the power I've gained.
However, Wesker is also extremely cocky and easily distractible, so Chris gets the opportunity to drop a bunch of metal on him, and that barely even phases him. This is obviously a losing fight on Chris's end, but once again, Wesker is stopped from immediately killing Chris by another very convenient distraction.
Today's your lucky day. Next time we meet, don't count on another.
Next time.
Until we meet again.
Chris races back to the jet and manages to land on the front of it in a photo finish. And as the two manage to escape from the exploding facility, they once again swear vengeance on Umbrella.
I'm sorry, Claire, but it's not over yet. There's still something we've got to do.
You mean...
Yeah, it's payback time. We've got to destroy Umbrella. Now, let's finish this once and for all.
That ends Resident Evil Code Veronica. So now that it's over, we can talk about Battle Game! The battle game is a minigame added that can be best described as a mix between the 4th Survivor and Extreme Battle in Resident Evil 2. You're given a list of unlockable characters and are tasked with completing a series of levels within a set time limit for the best ranking. You're also weirdly able to play the game in first-person mode now. So, I don't know, if you want to have much less visibility as you try to stare through thick Dreamcast fog, be my guest. I don't think it's a very useful feature, and I think it might be a remnant from the Survivor game made after this. But whatever, I guess I can't fault the game for having additional options. All characters go through the same areas, but each character has a unique final boss at the end of the section. It's a shame how repetitive the main levels can be when playing through all the characters, but the unique boss is a very welcome addition. For the most part though, this might be the easiest bonus minigame yet. Everyone usually has at least one powerful weapon, and for some reason they decided to make ammo completely unlimited for this game. Kind of a bizarre move, because that means I have absolutely no reason to use anything else. Why would I use the shotgun when I have an infinite ammo Magnum? To make things even easier, there's a slot machine that each character can use for a chance at a unique item for a bit more help at the cost of time. But often this isn't even needed for many of the characters. I guess I should also quickly bring up the special note in the slot machine. Every character has a 40% chance to receive the DIJ diary note rather than health or ammo. This is like a joke diary that recounts the story of Code Veronica through the eyes of DIJ the Rat. This is an actual character that can be seen many times throughout the game, often in the background of cutscenes. Kinda silly, but after you've read it once, it's kinda ridiculous that it can still impede your progress on second playthroughs, including when you play as Wesker. Wesker is the obligatory play the game with only a knife mode, but since the knife is actually kinda decent in this game, his challenge is more than doable, allowing me to complete it first try. What's crazy though is that his final boss is with the first phase of Alexia, the one that will insta-kill you if you get too close. His bonus item that you get in the slot machine is a Magnum, but even then you have a 20% chance to get the useless diary for some ungodly reason. If you are very unlucky, then your Wesker run can be impossible at no fault of your own, which is stupid as hell. Other than that, there isn't much difficult about this game mode, except Chris's final boss against Final Form Alexia. This fight is horribly misplaced, as you were originally meant to manually aim the linear launcher to hit her, but now you can only use a Magnum to hit an enemy that isn't even on screen to tell if you're hitting her half the time, all within a limited time limit to get A rank. The best way I found to fight her is to try your hardest to maneuver her into an unclear corner so you can reliably wail on her without her flying away. Steve's ending also has the most unsettling ending artwork. My god, man, what is wrong with your mouth? How's it look in the HD version? Oh god, that's not better at all. Achieving A rank with each character grants you the permanent linear launcher. No, not for the main game, only for battle mode. Kinda disappointing if you ask me. But Code Veronica does indeed have an infinite rocket launcher for the main game. To acquire it, you have to get an A rank in the story mode. Getting an A rank in Code Veronica entails quite a few requirements. You cannot use any first aid sprays, no saves excluding the free one given to you in the middle of the game, because originally you had to worry about swapping discs. No deaths, finish the game in under 4.5 hours, you have to save Steve when he's being microwaved in the mansion, and you have to save Rodrigo by giving him medicine. After that, fuck him, let him get eaten by the worm, no one cares. I believe that Code Veronica is the hardest Resident Evil game so far, especially due to the A rank requirement. I'm telling you, I am incredibly thankful for that midpoint save, because the second half of this game was a fucking nightmare to me when it came to those instant deaths. I died multiple times to everyone. Nosferatu, Alexia, and of course that goddamn concrete slab. But finally managing to overcome these challenges has been the most rewarding experience for me yet, besides I guess completing A-rank Nikolai and the Mercenaries in Resident Evil 3. So that's pretty much all of Resident Evil Code Veronica X. It's a very weird game. At pretty much every point while playing this game, I can point out a unique aspect different from the other games that can only be described as weird. It's weird that the knife is good here. It's weird that Steve is supposed to be likable. It's weird that so many bosses insta-kill you. It's weird that the main villain is a cross-dresser with multiple personalities. It's weird that the battle game gives you infinite ammo. Sometimes the weird things are positive, like the knife or a crazy story. Sometimes they're negative, like the insta-kills and Steve. But you know what? A weird game is a memorable game. And all these features make Code Veronica stand out to me more and more, to the point that I might even say Code Veronica is my favorite Resident Evil game to play through yet. But regardless of my own personal opinion, this game is absolutely riddled with flaws and poor design choices. It makes this game kind of hard to critique fairly, because every time I think of something good, I think of something bad to counter it. It has better villains than the other games, but less genuinely well-developed protagonists. It has visually interesting camera usage, but less beautifully detailed backgrounds. It has a single very memorable leitmotif, but not a memorable soundtrack as a whole. The bosses all have interesting gimmicks, but they also have cheap deaths and tricks. It just goes on and on. I think in the end, I'm gonna have to give Resident Evil Code Veronica a middling 5 out of 10, due to the strong factors on both sides. But on a personal level, I really do enjoy this game quite a bit. And in order from best to worst, I'm gonna put Code Veronica smack dab in the middle. If there's any Resident Evil game that is in need of a remake to level everything out about it, it would be Code Veronica. But now, we aren't quite done yet with Code Veronica. Join me next time as we jump back into the Survivor series with Resident Evil Survivor 2, Code Veronica.